I need a whistle. Right. Hello. Hi. Hello. Hi. Woo, woo, woo. Hello. Hi. Hi, and welcome all to our second event of the year, the Bounce Back. I'm Steph Matthews, and I'm the 2019 Bloom President. Woo! Thanks, Ronnie. By day, I am a senior campaign manager at Virgin in the brand team, and I've actually got my big boss, Lisa, here today, so pressure's on, and I hope the evening goes well. A bit about Bloom before we start. So we are on a mission to ensure women have equal opportunity in the industry by harnessing the power of our real voices. And we do that by future-proofing women's careers through training and networking. We want to spearhead industry change through our events and our Booth of Truth, which we launched at Bloomfest 2017, which is we've got one here. It's kind of an anonymous platform for your truths. And we want to pay it forward for the next generation. And we do that through a mentoring program for our industry rising stars, and we do it through fundraising for Women's Aid. So not much to do as a volunteer organisation. But all of that has kind of steered where we are tonight with the Bounce Back. So how to risk more and fail better. So hands up who's up for talking about their failures tonight. Oh, great. Well, I wanted 100%, but I'm not going to get that because it's not an easy thing to do, to kind of admit about your failures. But our mission tonight is to get everyone more comfortable talking about their failures. We want you to be more honest about them and realise that there's a real kind of bravery about kind of putting yourself out there and taking a risk, because so many people do just take that kind of easy route. But the more we risk, the more the potential to fail, but the more that we can learn and the sweeter the success when we get there. Think about Serena Williams, who lost the US Open last year. So she said, "I think a champion is defined not by their wins, but how they can recover when they fall." Or Michael Jordan. "So I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games, and 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot, and I've missed. So I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed." But he's actually quite unique in his outlook, as Elizabeth Day found, the failure journo and podcast host. So when she interviewed lots of men, she found that they were actually unable to kind of talk about their big failures. They would kind of talk about minor ones like losing a tennis match. But women were able to reel off kind of countless times that they'd failed. So I think they really do set the bar too high for themselves. And I think what's missing is that sharing element. So why aren't we all talking about our mistakes and our failures with each other? Because we really can all learn from each other and understanding our failures. At Bloom, we champion vulnerability, honesty, and realness, because when you share your stories, it really can lift and give strength. So do share your experiences of failure tonight with the audience and with our Booth of Truth run by Sally out there, because we know that your real voices can all lift everyone up and drive change in the industry. And to help us get there, we're taking a risk tonight. This is a totally new format for us, a panel and a workshop. Taking a risk, could fail, but we're prepared. But we're doing it because we want you all to learn, develop new skills, and learn from each other how to fail better. But before we kick off tonight, I just want to say thank you to Women at Facebook for hosting this. This is probably like one of the nicest, jazziest venues we've ever had, so thank you very much. We are due to finish just after 8:30, maybe slightly later just because of the security upstairs. And please share your thoughts online using the hashtag #TheBounceBack. I'm going to invite our panel up now, moderated by the lovely Nikki Kemp, managing editor at Byte from Creative Brief. And our panelists, please come up. Lisa, Andrew, and Spark. I'll jump down. Who'll be sharing their experiences of failure and how it shaped them. Then the latter part of the evening is run by Rosie Dalling, who is a Bloom member and our coach. And she has a workshop called How to Fail Better. And she's taking it into Bloom tonight so we can all learn how to get more comfortable with our failures and kind of foster an environment to fail better. And actually, before the panel start, Rosie's just going to kick off the night with an exercise to get us all in a kind of failure mindset. So lean in and learn from each other's failures.
Thank you so much, Steph. One of the things that I really love about working with Bloom is that this is an organization that takes a topic that is timely and approaches it in a way that really cracks it open. And that is what I hope we're going to do tonight. So why failure? Why this topic? And why have we specifically taken the extra step of asking our panel to be blisteringly honest? Well, as a coach, failure is something that I see close up. Unfortunately, it's often as a result of a calamity or something really bad happening that I'm called in. But I also see something else all too frequently. I see fear of failure. I see regret. I see unfulfillment. And I also see inaction. And it's this inaction through fear of failure that can often be more damaging than failure itself. So tonight, we're going to take one small step towards action, and we're going to learn what you need to be more resilient so that you can find the courage to take those risks and fail better. Recently, I was at my daughter's sports day, and there was a little girl, she was about 7 years old, and she was winning all the races. And you could see the determination on her face with every victory. She was like, I win races, that's what I do. And she came to the 400-meter race, and within the first couple of steps, she tripped. And my maternal instinct kicked in. She was crying, and I just wanted to scoop her off that track and take her away from humiliation. But to my surprise, something remarkable happened. Her PE teacher, the rather handsome Mr. Newsom, joined her on the track, and he urged her to carry on running. And he jogged alongside her, chatting enthusiastically. And the crowd began to cheer and clap. And it was so interesting to see these emotions go over her face. The slight pain in her ankle, the embarrassment at tripping, the shame at running that track by herself. And then the dawning realization that there were people cheering her on, and the determination returned to her face, and she crossed that finish line with a smile on her face. A colleague of mine here at Bloom reminded me of something that the poet Robert Frost said. The best way out is always through. But we don't always have a crowd cheering us on. And the way through is sometimes bleak and uninviting. But if we take the courage to look inside ourselves, to wade in and confront those difficult feelings, then what we learn about ourselves, about other people, and the world around us is much more rewarding than running away. So that's what we're going to be doing this evening. And in a second, I'm going to hand over to Nikki and the panel. But before that, I just want to focus your mind. I want to help you connect to a failure. I want you to ask you to think of something, and I'm going to ask the panel to do this as well, just to close your eyes and to think of something that hasn't gone very well for you. And I just want you to create a little movie of that in your mind. And just zoom in on the worst 3 seconds of that experience. And give that little movie a title. And just notice what is going on in your body. What are you feeling? What are the emotions? What's coming up? And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and just gently come back into the room. And we're going to be coming back to that after the panel discussion. And we're going to be cracking that open and really facing up to what's happened to you. So I'm going to hand over to Nikki and the panel now. Thank you so much, and I'll see you after the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to now snap out of my failure mindset and go over to this booth of truth. So the bounce back. In a social media-driven ecosystem of performative living, failure is perhaps not talked about enough. And for women who exist in a media narrative in which even the most successful women are cast as failures, whether through being childless or too ambitious, this can be a double bind. So we've got the Booth of Truth here, which has some insights from some of you as to what failure means to you. So I'm just going to read a few of those just to set up the panel. So one of them said, women feel an enormous pressure to be role models when we are senior, and that puts pressure on us. Women should be taken off pedestals. I didn't know we were going to be sitting on these. And we need to be able to fail, muck up, and fall off stools. I spend most of my time worrying about failure. It has stopped me from ever really doing anything I want to do. I am paralyzed by the fear of failure. I don't share this because it feels embarrassing to admit this as a grown woman. And the last one, I think women feel the pressure to be perfect more than men. When we fail, it is harder to pick ourselves up again. We can't just bluff it, ignore the mistake. Just look at the current Tory leadership contest. So when we are taught that failure is something to be ashamed of, it's interesting that a growing number of women and men are reclaiming the narrative and redefining risk-taking, success, and failure on their own terms. And in the spirit of that new honest narrative, I have a brilliant panel here that are going to share their own stories of failure and how to overcome it. So on my left, I have Lisa Thomas. She is Global Chief Brand Officer at Virgin, where she oversees one of the world's most iconic brands. As former group CEO of M&C Saatchi, her experience spans across the traditional client and agency divide. She's the incoming president of Wackle, so alongside Steph, I think Virgin are kind of doing their bit in this space and some. And she's been instrumental in the group's deeds, not words, shift to campaigning. And then next to her, I have the lovely Andrew Monu. He is not our token man. He is the Director of Field and Product Marketing EMEA at LinkedIn. He's held global marketing positions at Sport Focus and Yell. He's a passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion in all its forms. And he is an advisory board member for Involve. And he's also a lead in LinkedIn's internal drive to overcome unconscious bias. And last but not least, at the end, I've got Susan Park, who is also known as Spark. And she is Global Product Marketing Lead for Gaming at Facebook. She's held product marketing roles at Spotify and Google. And she's also done stints at the US Navy and as a reporter for the Orange County Register. She's a pioneer for the industry, being the first ever product marketing manager at Spotify. So to kick off, I'm going to ask the whole panel to share a personal story of failure and bouncing back from it. And if I could start with you, Lisa, that would be great.
Okay. Well, I could talk my day through in failure. Obviously, turned up on a panel, short skirt. Not a good idea. Let's get it out there. Missed my train this morning, 10 minutes late for my first meeting, which is a no-no in my world. So I could spend the next 2 hours or however long we're here regretting my failures, or I can move on. Steph and I had a few discussions in the run-up to today, including on my way out of the office one night, when she said, you know, you just need to think about that time when you had like an abject failure in your life. And I said, I think that's overthinking the amount of failure and maybe bigging me up. I think I'm a mere humble human being with setbacks in my life rather than failures. So I like to think about them as setbacks and not failures. And as I was coming here today, I'm not going to talk about a sort of one moment, but I was thinking about how you become more resilient and can celebrate or at least embrace failure or setbacks and see them as something that helps shape who you are, to be more human, to better understand what you're good at, you're less good at, and how you can encourage other people to think about that. And I remembered that as a young girl, I was absolutely terrified of failure. I learnt when I was 9 that I couldn't sing, and I remember my head teacher telling my parents that clearly it was the only thing I couldn't do, and therefore it had sent me into complete spin and total lack of security. And I tried to work out how I started to recover from that, and how I have moved on, and why I didn't really fear. I'm not sure I really fear anything now, and how I got there. And I think that was a number of things. One of them is I went to boarding school and became sort of quite independent because I had to. I think my mother has been a huge influence on my life and how I see my life. She's dead and died 25 years ago. But when I was growing up, there were 2 things I thought about today that were a good lesson for me. The first was she was very extrovert socially, but absolutely fearful of doing anything new, fearful of not going out with her makeup on, with her hair immaculate, and conforming to a stereotype. And I remember as a young girl thinking, that I mustn't be like that. I mustn't, because it stops you doing things. It stops you going somewhere without your husband or without someone to guide you. And I can remember processing that. And then, unfortunately, she got breast cancer. And I remember talking to her about not needing to wear a wig and about not needing to torture herself with this idea that she was now hugely imperfect. And I can remember as a young woman, by this time I was sort of in my late teens, and I remember thinking, how can that be, that she judges herself so badly that she can't be who she is, even though she's really unwell? And what is that in society, in her head, that makes her think about that? And I think I have spent quite a lot of the rest of my life fighting demons, both for myself and on her behalf. And somebody talked about, I think it was Rosie, talked about how you deal with those things. And I'm definitely one, if any of you saw me at the Wackle thing, I'm definitely one for a good chat with myself in the mirror and a good sort of look inside to kind of give you that confidence. But so I have got probably 1 or 2 moments, but that's kind of how I think about those setbacks and how I've tried. I've read some of the Booth of Truth moments, and they're quite profound. I'm fortunate. I don't live every day with fear, but I definitely talk to myself every day about not being fearful.
Thank you. And Andrew, could you share your perspective?
So I'm Nigerian and we don't fail. I guess probably the thing that I think about the most is I realized that I was not remotely as brave as I thought I was. I'd come from Nigeria as an immigrant, and I was lucky I came on a scholarship to the UK, and then after that I decided I was going to get get a proper job. Now, in that time, before I got this proper job, I had been working at Blockbuster Video. Who remembers Blockbuster Video? Right.
Sadly.
Okay. Thank you. So I was 4 years at Blockbuster Video. It was on my CV, and I got into this corporate. And before I went into that corporate, I remember when I was in this Blockbuster Video, and I'd see these people come in, like in their suits and stuff, and I was like, yeah, if I do that, I'm going to completely be myself, because I completely know who I am, and I'm just going to go in and just do my thing. And I went in from the very first day that I started this job in this corporate world. I was the only black guy. And I just knew, I 100% knew that I was in the wrong room. I didn't deserve to be there. And I just hid the entire time. I felt like every day I was pulling off a massive kind of magic trick without them not finding out that I was screwing up. And so I took no risks. I didn't even acknowledge anything about my blackness, my culture, anything. I did everything I could to suppress it and just imitate the people around me. And the thing that upset me about it was probably two things. I did it for 4 years. And I just thought that I would never be that person. I thought I was like way too strong for that, way too, Nigerian for that. And I wasn't, and it really hurt me. And you talk about how you get out of it. I hit rock bottom. I was really unhappy. I'd never been so unhappy before. And I felt like I'd failed so much because I was set up for success. I had got an amazing degree. I'd worked really hard. I'm Nigerian. And with all those things at my disposal, I still just sold out. I completely sold out. So it's not one that, I kind of let drag me down, but I never forget it.
Thank you. And Susan, could you
Please call me Spark.
Spark.
Everyone, call me Spark.
It says it on your neck.
I know. It was a gift. I wear it when I get nervous. It helps me feel a little better. So thank you for introducing, and thank you guys so much for sharing your stories. I totally understand where you're coming from on that. So I faced failure extremely early in my career. I was actually in flight school for the US Navy, and I was training to be a naval aviator. And has anyone seen Top Gun? That's Goose. Yeah, who's seen Top Gun? Less people who know Blockbuster. Great movie.
Need to watch that film.
Exactly. Don't want to give it away though, but so I was training to be a naval aviator, but unfortunately, I had a real wake-up call about how toxic the environment was in flight school. I was one of 20 women in 300 and one of 2 of East Asian descent, so we stood out like crazy. And I actually escaped a near assault, and I realized it wasn't a matter of, I know, it was really freaky. It wasn't a matter of if I was going to become a victim, it was a matter of when. And I made a decision that I couldn't stay in that environment and I need to get out. However, this was the first time I had to drop out of flight school. Like, this was a commitment that I had made, very serious, and a very strong career commitment that I've been training for the past 4 years of my life. And I wasn't tough enough to hack it in flight school. And I still feel terrible. I still feel like I dropped out to this day about it. But when I look back at it, and I think about what gave me the confidence to do it, and I've read a bunch of sociological books to help me kind of put it into perspective, is this concept of a safety net. So every single person in this room, based upon your socioeconomic status, your skill, and your birth, is probably born with some sort of a safety net. If you are a white man who's rich and very privileged and smart, I'm sure thank you guys for being here. You guys are born not just with a safety net, but it's like a freaking safety trampoline. Like, you fail and you bounce back, like, no problem. I, being of Asian American, middle class family, I had a pretty decent safety net known as my parents' couch, which is also not great when you have Asian American parents who are just like, what? You have a good college degree, you have all this. What does this mean that you're coming back and turning your back on a career that you had set out for, that you were supposed to serve your country to do? A country that had given so much to me at the time. So I did it. I got my honorable discharge, got out of the Navy, and landed very gratefully into my parents' safety net, aka their bedroom in Orange County, California. And a year later, I crawled out of the safety net and got an entry-level job at Google. And that started off my year in ad tech, and I've been Google, Spotify, Facebook ever since, and now I'm running a team that touches $5 billion of revenue every year. So it's tough and it's terrible, but I think what really got me through it is recognizing my safety net. And everybody in here has their safety net, and what helped me take risk is either shoring up my safety net or understanding what I could do with my safety net. I hope everybody realizes that you have one, whether it's your friends, your peer set, or in this group, and you should take advantage of it if you need to and if you want to take a risk.
Thank you. And I think that's such an interesting point in terms of, you sort of used the term dropping out, but actually you are making a positive choice do something different and get yourself out of an environment that was not good for you. And one of the things that's come up in a lot of the answers in the Booth of Truth is this notion that perhaps fear of appearing a failure or adhering to somebody else's version of what success looks like is holding women back, and particularly looking all the data that shows that women won't go for a job. I'm not going to mention Boris Johnson, I just mentioned him, but like unless they fulfill 100% of the criteria, whereas you've got, you know, a guy that will just have a punt at being Prime Minister of the entire country. So what can we do to sort of encourage that shift? Because to your point, you know, you use the term dropping out, but what you did was lean into something that was going to be better for you. Like, what would be your advice to other women and men sort of in that space?
So I hope you guys don't mind if I start with this first, because I love this question. And a lot of reasons why I love this question is because I have this big theory that it shouldn't matter why you got that seat at the table. Like, if you look around the room, most likely, someone else probably also got that seat at the table because his dad plays golf with someone else's dad. Is that more worthy than you're having an amazing degree and all of that stuff? Doesn't matter, you have that seat at the table, but you should keep that seat at the table. So if you need to get additional coaching, do other things, I pay for an executive coach, all of that stuff, to stay at that table, realize you'll need to do more to stay at the table, and that's fine. The second thing is that I realized this when a woman recently reached out to me to interview for a very senior job that she was leaving, is that we as women don't do that enough, I think. So when I've started to make a commitment that if there's a job open or if I am leaving a job, to actually tap a woman and tell them, hey, you should go for this, you should think about this, even if because half of it isn't the fact that they're raising their hands, but we don't really have a culture of, hey, attaboy, you should do this, you should look at this job, you should look at that. Whereas, because every job I've gotten, literally, I'd never found it for myself. I had my network find it or someone else help me out do it. So I think that's something that we should take ownership of doing and help people do that, and do that by tapping more women for these jobs that we're leaving versus just kind of moving on. And I think men do that much better than we do.
Andrew, I'd love to get your view on that as well, because you talked about sort of what it feels like when you can't be yourself in an environment. I mean, how did you kind of get the resilience to go on and do so well? Like, what would you say to people who perhaps feel like they've hit that wall, or they're too scared to make a move because they feel like that wall is going to be there if they're comfortable where they are?
So I think probably for me, the first thing that was helpful is I have something that I generally live by, that you're never as amazing or as shit as people say you are. If you know that to be true, then you know it gives you a perspective about success and failure equally. And I think that we can definitely spend too much time. I think we just don't. A lot of the time, we don't give ourselves permission to fail. The amount of times that we'll talk about it more, I'm sure, but we have our own hang-ups about failure. But I think some of it is actually giving ourselves that permission to fail. It is like, I am proof. Like, how bad can it be? Like, I'm a director. I've failed a lot. So if I've done it, anyone here can.
And Lisa, could I get your view as well? Because you touched on resilience in your introduction, and data from Creative Equal shows that 12% of women in the creative industries are thinking of leaving within the next 2 years. I mean, how do you kind of ensure that women don't opt out to do something else? Is it about taking more control of your own career, or taking more risks, or putting yourself forward more? I mean, what advice would you give in terms of that sort of context of people exiting the industry? So,
I mean, I think it's really difficult. We had this conversation at LinkedIn yesterday, actually, with Josh Gruff. It's really difficult because women feel that they need to leave because they're not progressing. It tends to be in the middle of their career. They might be thinking about having a child or have started a family. And there are, our industry, I think it's less true on the client side, is not geared to a sales structure that accommodates more flexible working. And So I think there are people like us who are out pioneering for that change and seeking that change. I'd also say go for it and try. I was on a panel at Gather with Sarah Tate, who works 4 days a week. She's CEO of, help me here?
TBWA.
And she works 4 days a week. 5th day, she homeschools her child. And she went into her interview process at TBWA. She had no idea that she didn't really believe they would give it to her. She just thought they'd ask. And they did. They gave it to her. And it's not like it's the 5th day that you're really working from home, but they're not paying you. She homeschools her daughter. So I was really impressed with that, sticking her neck out. I also think, Steph talked earlier about pay it forward. I do think we all have a responsibility. Spot talked about it there. Sponsorship programs are not as prevalent as they should be. They're certainly not prevalent in agencies. So how can senior women, senior men step up and support, reach out to young women and young men and encourage them to take on promotions? How can we institutionalise proper development programmes for the people who work in our organisations, even if sometimes it might mean they leave, but at least you're facilitating their career. And then the other thing, which I thought was really fascinating and I didn't do but wish I had, Carolyn Everson talks about creating your own personal board. And she doesn't mean it in any formal sense, but surrounding yourself with people who perhaps are either your peer group or perhaps a bit more senior than you, who you really trust, not quite your safety net, but who you really, really trust, and who will help you give you that confidence, you know, in a quite analytical way rather than that safety net, oh darling, you should go for it, but in a more analytical way. And she gets together with her board on big decisions that she makes. I think that's a brilliant idea if you can find people to mentor you, but also who can counsel you in that way is a brilliant idea.
I think the data backs it up as well. I
Yeah.
agree with both of you
Yeah.
for sure, but like women are less likely to go for jobs unless they are like 100% ticking the box.
Yeah.
But actually when women go for a job, they are more likely to get that job than men. And actually, even when they go for more senior roles, they're more likely to get them than men. So the data actually backs it up. It's a LinkedIn stat. So they're 18% more likely to get a job even for more senior roles.
And what do you think is the key to sort of unlocking that potential? Because if women leave the industry because they feel that they're not progressing, and Andrew, I'd love to get your view on this, because particularly when I do a lot of LinkedIn stalking as a journalist, you know, if I'm interviewing people, and you can get men and women at the same level, and it's like they're from different countries in terms of the way that they explain their skills and their expertise. And is it that women need to adopt that kind of quite sort of what some women would see as quite grandiose explaining of their skills and their abilities, or is it actually that we need to be more accommodating of people's willingness to explain themselves in the way that they want to, that they're comfortable with? I mean, what's the key to kind of unlocking that potential? Because there is that leadership gap.
No, I think you're right. I think there's an entire kind of ecosystem around it. On one hand, you have recruiters that actually tend to look at male profiles more than female profiles sometimes when they see male and female. But I think there's also the element that when job descriptions are done, it works against the way that data are showing that women look at roles. They basically ask for things that are necessary, desirable, preferred, and then the list just goes longer and longer and longer and longer. And if someone feels they have to tick every box, you're just like, how many of these things in this role do you actually need for me to do this role? So there's all those things kind of make it challenging. But from a profile perspective, do I think that women need to describe themselves differently? I wouldn't want to say that. I wouldn't want, I think people should be who they are. Yeah. But I do think that there is a best practice of how you sell yourself. I don't think you have to be someone else. I just think the way that you sell yourself from a best practice perspective.
Obviously, I have something to say. I agree. I think that's very, very true. I think women do need to actually speak up more about their accomplishments and laud themselves better. For instance, it took me a while before I could say I was the first ad product marketing manager at Spotify. It was due. I wrote my job description, all of that. It's factually correct, but it was hard for me to come up with that big of a grandiose statement. Where men is not as much of an issue. What I would say is, though, what I found as a woman, though, is that most likely you will be called out more for your grandiose statement than men will. So I see some nods in the audience. So I would say that I think that's actually a very healthy gut check, right? Is say that grandiose statement, but say, would 3 other people that I work with agree that I did that? And I could say yes, so I'm gonna continue with that grandiose statement. I don't think men do that stuff, but I also don't think they have to. I think women do because we will get vetted, we probably will get questioned more. My CV, I feel like gets minusculely looked at every interview, bring it on. But you need to get better at stating how great you are, but definitely make sure it is accurate with like 2 to 3 other people would back you up. Because you need allies to make sure you look great still.
And with that in mind, there's a really interesting conversation happening right now around imposter syndrome, which is basically kind of fear of not feeling that you should be there, which is something that everyone's touched on in different ways. I mean, how, as people in the workplace, do we overcome imposter syndrome? I mean, is there a role in terms of, Spark, you mentioned, championing people and bringing people up? I mean, what do you see as the kind of key way to overcome that? Lisa, I'd love to get your view on that with your Wackle hat on as well, because you're obviously sort of leaning into change as well. Like, how do you ensure that you're kind of feeling equipped to do that?
So I think Spark's comment before about, once you've got a seat at the table, make sure you keep it. You can only fake it till you make it for a certain amount of time. And I think we as women are not particularly comfortable with faking it. I don't really know how comfortable men are with faking it. But Boris Johnson seems to be doing quite a good job at the moment. So we'll keep with that extreme end. And arguably Donald Trump's done quite well on it. But I do think that we all suffer from it. I think I said earlier, the greatest relief to me was when somebody told me that there was a thing called imposter syndrome, because then I realised I wasn't the only person that I wondered what I was doing in a room sometimes and whether I should be there. But I think in some ways it's quite healthy to question and challenge yourself and make sure that you deserve the seat at the table, pay for the executive coach, share with your peer group or your friends what your concerns and your worries are and how do you overcome them. I think also be honest with yourself and try and be honest with what you're good at and what you need to learn more about and what your complementary skills are with your peer group, and make sure that you do feel you earn that place at the table. Keep talking to the voice in the mirror or the voice on your shoulder or your peer group. I'm not sure how we change it, other than I do think, and there's a lot of talk about it at the moment, that we are not all the same. Believe it or not. And I do think that the world of business has grown up in an echo chamber, in a mirror of itself, and we are only gradually waking up to the fact that it's great to have extroverts in organisations, that it's great to be from a different ethnic background, or indeed just be yourself in a different way to other people. It is more accepted to be yourself when you go to work now than it was certainly when I was growing up. Might not be still true in the city, but it's definitely true in our industry. And I think that helps a lot with imposter syndrome, because there is a much greater acceptance that you can be yourself at work and at home, and you don't need to be 2 people.
Thank you. And Andrew, I'd love to get your view on that as well, in terms of, do you feel now you've reached a stage in your career where you can, I know it's a sort of cliche, but bring your whole self to work, and how's that kind of helped you get over that sense of feeling like you don't belong?
I think I'm fortunate that I'm in a good place now to feel a sense of belonging, where I work and so on. I would say, I guess I got 2 points on imposter syndrome. So one is the downside of it, one is the kind of more positive way out. I think that, so someone wrote a comment about how they felt the pressure of when a woman is in leadership and how that can just feel like if you screw up, that's just momentous. I'm paraphrasing. But I could definitely relate to that, because the feeling of loneliness when you're one of the only people, whether it's gender or race or whichever else, I think the way I described it to you guys is that I feel like when you have that kind of imposter syndrome, there is an imposter tax that you pay. It's a higher rate tax that you pay, because when you screw up, it feels so much more. You feel like you were on borrowed confidence anyway. And so now when it goes wrong, it's like, oh my God, like they absolutely know. And you feel like, you're screwing it up for the next person. But to your point around, power through, the whole thing about faking it is that it's not a permanent state, right? Like I definitely believe you are supposed to fake it at the initial stage. It is exactly what I did, and I just kept on going. And then at some point, I was like, I think I know what I'm doing. Maybe I know what I'm doing. And then it was like, no, hold on, I do. A lot of people think I know what I'm doing, so I'm going to keep going. So that is my view on it. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. And Spark, I'd love to get your view as well, like as to, was there like a specific point in your career where you felt like, yeah, you mentioned being a real kind of game changer at Spotify. Was there a moment in your career where you kind of let go of imposter syndrome, or is it something that we just need to recognize is just, it's almost innate in everyone apart from he who shall be nameless?
So I think I have a mixed feeling about this, because I do think imposter syndrome or reaching for something is actually very good and healthy in certain aspects. Actually, in a lot of aspects. So I feel like I feel like I'm challenging everything. I would challenge you to, if you're not feeling imposter syndrome at least 10% of the time, are you really stretching yourself? Mm-hmm. Are you getting better? And if it all comes back to, I think, safety. In a lot of ways, I think I was very lucky after understanding the need of emotional support and why I need that emotional support in order to fail and all of that stuff, to lean onto that, and that once you know you have it, then you can continue to do it. So I think the problem with imposter syndrome is when it becomes unhealthy, when it paralyzes you. Because either you don't feel like you're keeping the seat at the table, or you feel like you can't go for a job because of that. That's when I think it's unhealthy, and then you should mitigate that. So I would just try to play the balance in the right way, because if you're never feeling imposter syndrome, you're probably not growing, and you're probably not trying to fail, and that's probably not a great thing either. So try to take the healthy part of it if possible.
That's a great point. And just before we hand over for audience questions, I just wanted everyone to kind of really briefly sort of give us 1 point on what failure or risk-taking has taught you. And Lisa, if I could kick off with you.
I think it has taught me that failing is actually normal. It's okay to fail. You don't have to be perfect. And actually learning in business in particular to deal with those failures is what makes you who you are, rather than just focusing on your successes. And I've definitely learned to embrace those failures. I don't look forward to them, but I embrace them. I do talk to myself for a bit, but I have learned to see them as a way of finding a different way through it. Rosie said it earlier. Just finding a way through it is really important. It builds your resilience. I think it makes you a better person, a better human being, and definitely more comfortable leading an organisation, because things do go wrong.
Yeah, thank you. And Andrew, what would be your take?
Yeah, completely agree. I guess I don't think of failure in an absolute sense. I don't think of failure and success as this binary kind of existence. I mean, how many people here have lost $1 billion on the stock exchange? Like, it's not like, oh my God, like I just completely 100% screwed up. I've had scenarios where things haven't, like some things have gone well, some things didn't go well. And my problem is I have focused and obsessed about the things that didn't go well. So it's not as if almost every scenario I can think of where I failed, it's not as if there wasn't an ability for me to go, hold on a second, like, actually I could learn from that in some way. And there were actually some good things. It's just that, I mean, my wife will basically be like, oh my God, like there was this, there was this, there was this, and you didn't even pay any attention to that. So it's not in absolute. That would be my view.
That's great. And Susan?
Yeah, I'm loving everything you guys are saying. I think it all ties, for me, with failure, because I was too tied with what people thought of me, was that people are nicer than I thought. Like when you mess up, people are actually really helpful.
Yeah.
Like I love the anecdote that was told in the beginning, because when you fall down, people tend to want to help you, especially if you're a nice person. And that also feels kind of great too, when you start to realize how many people that love and are invested in your success as well. So I think that was the biggest wake-up call for me in failure, which is also why I'm kind of so glad it happened so early in my career, is that I realized that a lot of people would help me. Like, for instance, the person who referred me to Google was my sorority pledge mom, and she introduced me to someone because she knew that I was flailing after flight school. It's great. Like, fail more, tell people about it, and you'll also figure out who you should say bye-bye to and who you should bring onto your personal board.
Yeah.
And so to open it up to questions, has anybody got any? I love this idea of personal board, by the way. That's a brilliant idea. Has anybody got any questions or anything? Oh, there's one just back there.
I just wanted to ask, is there any advice about publicly acknowledging your failures, especially in a work environment? Should you be open and honest with people, or how do you point things out? Do you do it in a positive way? Or, like, I just wanted to ask you something.
That's a really good question. Who would like to take that?
For me to go?
Yes, please.
So I think you have to be. So my personal brand, if I were talking about it, marries with the brand that I work for, which is I'm completely straight up. I'm completely myself. But you can't do that without respecting other people's feelings or other people's engagement in whatever it is you're talking about. And I started an agency many years ago, and I literally went from me and a desk to sort of 200 people over a period of time. I ran it for 10 years, and in that time, obviously there were moments of success, and there were moments of, and the most obvious one is losing a pitch or missing your numbers for the year end. And I, to use your wonderful world, I flailed through that a couple of times. And then I realised that actually just standing up in front of everyone, explaining what had happened, explaining the process we had gone through, and actually using that as an opportunity instead of just focusing on the downside of it or seeing it as a shared failure, focusing on the strengths of what we had done, what we had learned, that it left us in a weakened financial position, but that we were in it together. And then focused on the next challenge. And sometimes we did that in the context of how do we make sure that our people feel good about it? So do we introduce some, slightly different, like one time we used it to introduce people, the idea that the company was getting older, we introduced the idea that people would be able to have a sabbatical. So having put our people at the centre of the agency, we tried to think about ways that they would share in our success and our failure, but also didn't make the failures so low. And I think one of the things that I have learned, particularly actually moving to a client organisation, and particularly an organisation that's very, very, it's a financial services business at its core, that they've sort of stumbled across the fact they've got a brand, I know, would you believe it? But it's quite respectful of in its culture and very respectful of its people. And I came from a very entrepreneurial culture where people, would tell you if you'd been a pile of shit rather than really good. And so having some of that sense of how do I think of the other people vested in this, and really has been quite top of my mind as I've joined a new organisation. But definitely face into it, because everyone can see what's happening anyway. So if you try and put the veneer on top of it, you will always get found out, and it won't be reassuring for your team or for the wider organisation.
Thank you.
I would actually like to add on that if I
course.
could, because I've definitely been in these situations as well, and there's a little bit of a framework that sometimes I take to it, especially with this kind of project failure, first of all, you have to de-emotionalize it, and as well to what Lisa said, just go over the facts and all of that. But if you're truly talking about failure, either your company has a culture of failure, so it's okay to talk about it. However, you also have to make sure that your manager or the person who is validating your experience also agrees that you should openly talk about failure and not use it to weaponize it. Because I've actually had managers at very failure-driven companies who actually have weaponized my failures.
Yeah.
So I would think about, okay, if this culture doesn't exist at my company, can I find pockets of that culture to stir it, resonate it, and find safety points where that can exist? And then I, very early in my managerial conversations, try to soft touch small failures to figure out if this is a true mentor manager or is he just my line manager? Is he someone that is really going to help me and she going to help me improve, get better at my failures and mush forward, or do I have to paint for him or her the perfect perception of myself so I can get promoted? And you have those types of two different managers. Vet out which one it is, and if it's the latter, I would be very careful on how you choose failure conversations, but do it in a very, impactful way, and find other people to talk about your failures for you to grow with, to make sure you're progressing in the right way. Because the last thing I would want, like it has been done for me in my career, to have my burnout, my lack of being able to finish a project because I hadn't scoped it properly, weaponized against me during a performance review, which has happened to me before. And no one should go through that.
Yeah, agree.
That's such a great point.
Different perspective.
I'm so sorry, but we don't have any more time for questions because we've failed to moderate. I failed to keep to time. So all that remains is to say thank you so much to the panel for sharing so honest, so many really, really great points. I'm going to put to Steph.
Well, Nikki, thank you very much. And then we're going to have a quick chair move with our chair assistants. Oh, it looks like it's me. And then Rosie's going to take us through a workshop on how to fail better.
Thank you. I'll just get going while the chairs are coming off stage. Thank you so much to the panel. It was so interesting to hear all of the varied and unique stories about failure. And now it's our turn. So, are you ready? Yeah, you'll get there. Seriously, if you do feel at all that any of these topics or subjects that are coming up this evening are at all overwhelming, then please do feel free to sit out any of the work that we're doing this evening. And if after the event you feel that you would like some support, then do get in touch with Bloom and we will aim to point you in the right direction. So, what do we want? Do we want to fail better? Yeah. Do we want to bounce back after failure? Yeah. Okay, so if you feel that you would like to do that and you'd also like to provide a supportive and safe environment for everyone else in this room, in your lives to do that, then I'm just going to encourage you to have a little look around and give each other a friendly smile. I know we're English. I know we're in London particularly. I know it feels awkward. Yeah, well done. Doing so well. And just turn around and just catch someone's eye across the other side of the room. Give someone a friendly wave over there. Let's see some friendly waves happening. Amazing. Okay, so I'm really curious. The exercise that we did before the panel event, we connected to our failures. And I'm really curious to know, what were some of the feelings that were coming up? Does anyone want to be brave and share? Yeah. You were embarrassed. Where did you feel that? In your throat. What did it feel like? Like you felt sick. I really relate to that. I'm almost experiencing it. What else? Thank you for sharing. What? Yeah. Punishment. Where did you feel the punishment? Where's up here? In your hands, and you made a fist. Yeah. What did that feel like in your fist? You wanted to beat yourself up. That's not very nice, is it? No. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else want to share what? Yeah.
Anxious.
You felt anxious. Where did you feel that?
Across the chest, and your whole body goes like
Hot and tingly. So that's another, it's like a physical manifestation of the feeling. So often these emotions come with physical feelings as well. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we've got
shrinking.
a
It would become smaller, like something in your shoulder, like a sense of paralyzed.
a shrinking paralysis. That's really scary, isn't it? Yeah. So these are big, scary feelings. They're not very nice to experience. And these are our body's way of keeping ourselves safe. It's our brain's way of reminding us to stay away from danger. Now, I'm going to share a secret with you. I love bread. I really love bread. And I had to go through a gluten-free diet recently. It wasn't very nice. And when I finished the gluten-free diet, I bought myself a bread maker as a reward. And bread makers are magical machines. And the first time I made my bread, I lifted the lid and I put in my flour and my sugar and my salt and my yeast and my butter and my water. And I shut the lid and I pressed my buttons and I waited for 5 hours. Could have actually just gone to the shop, but I waited for 5 hours. And the smell of the bread permeated my kitchen. And when the beeper went off, I opened the lid, I reached in, and I burnt my hand. And it really, really hurt. And the next time I came to make my bread, I reflected on what had happened. And I realized that a bread machine is essentially an oven, and it bakes, it bakes a loaf at around 200 degrees, and the tin that you bake it in is metal. So it's probably a good idea to use an oven glove. And so I used my experience, I reflected on my story, I made sense of what happened, I made sense of the pain, and I found a way round it. But what is difficult is when we can't make sense of what happened, or when the pain is too overwhelming for us to face up to. And so what we are faced with then is the need to make sense of our story without the facts. And that's when we start to make assumptions. We create a little story for ourselves. And we believe it. So, by the way, what is a belief? Would anyone like to call out? What is a belief? Yeah. It's a thought. Okay, anyone like to expand on that? It's a thought. Yeah. A truth. Are you sure it's a truth?
Personal truth?
A personal truth. Okay. So a belief is really something that we accept to be true without having any evidence. Because once we have evidence, it becomes a fact. And when we are understanding our failure story and we don't have those facts, that's when we start to make our assumptions and believe things that we don't have evidence for. I'm going to share with you in a minute the work of Nancy Klein, who is a psychotherapist and coach. And Nancy Klein created something called the thinking environment. And she said, the quality of our actions depends on the quality of the thinking that we do first. The quality of our actions depends on the quality of the thinking we do first. And I'm going to ask you to do some quality thinking now. So I want you to close your eyes again. And I want you to think about something that you have always dreamed of doing. Something you would never dare to tell someone else that you'd like to do. Something that you haven't shared yet, but it's been your wildest desire. And I want you to imagine it happening. Imagine yourself in the throes of living out this dream. Who's smiling? How does this turn your life around? And when you're ready, just come back into the room, and I'm going to share a tool with you. Because Nancy Klein has very cleverly come up with a number of questions that help you interrogate the beliefs and assumptions that you have created that stop you from fulfilling this dream. And in a second, I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask yourselves and each other these questions. But I'm just going to take you through them first. So we've actually done questions 1 to 3 in that little exercise now. So you're going to start by asking question 4. What is it that you assume is stopping you from achieving that goal? And when you move on to question 5, this is really interesting because this is where we start to peel back the layers and understand the story behind that assumption. Because it's not just one layer of psychological torment that we have to get through. We put layer upon layer of assumptions, and that's how we end up unable to understand our failure story. So question 5 is, what's behind the assumption? Question 6 is really liberating because here you're going to ask, what's the opposite of that assumption? You're going to turn it on its head. And question 7 is, if you knew that the opposite of this assumption was true, what could you possibly do to live differently? These are your everyday actions. And we're going to leave question 8 to do at the end altogether. So I'm going to give you, let me just look at the time. I'm going to give you around 8 minutes to each, if you can work in partners. So turn to the person next to you. And if you don't have someone sitting immediately next to you, you can turn around and find someone. And you're going to ask each other these questions. And I'll let you know when to swap over. And if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand and I'll come to you. 9.
Walking in the dark, low enough to know. Finally see you light. Been gone long enough to know when I fire. Even the light I can tell he's walking in the sun. 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 Now the wind is at my back and I'm sailing on the ship, that's all I do. Well, I've took so many chances that I ain't gonna blow this chance. You been losing long enough to know when I fire. Even the light I can tell is walking in the sun. Walking in the sun. Walking in the sun. Walking in the sun.
Okay, swap over. Time to swap over. Okay, can you hear me? Time to swap over. Time to swap over. If you already haven't. If you
I've been thinking about you, baby. You want desire. Bring it home, baby. Gonna let you back. Bring it home, baby. Gonna let you back. Bring it home, baby. Gonna let you back. All day I've been thinking about you, baby. You want desire. Gonna wrap my arms around you, hold you close to me. Oh, baby, I wanna taste your lips. I wanna be your fantasy. Yeah, gonna wrap my arms around you, hold you close to me. Oh, baby, I wanna taste your lips, I wanna be your fantasy. Yeah, gonna wrap my arms around you, hold you close to me. Oh, baby, I wanna taste your lips, I wanna be your fantasy. Yeah, gonna wrap my arms around you, hold you close to me. Oh, baby, I wanna taste your lips, I wanna be your fantasy. Yeah. Every time I'm with you, baby, I can't believe it's true. When you lay in my arms and you do the things you do, I don't know what I'd do without you, baby. Don't know where I'd be. You're not just another lover, no, you're everything to me.
Okay. When you're ready, you can wind up. So, I'm curious to know, did anyone have any revelations? You're working with the amazing Dina Gornick. How can you not get a revelation working with Dina?
She's benefited more.
Oh, care to share, ladies?
Well, I'm at the generation of being attached to my phone and knowing how to use it a bit better than Dina does. And therefore, I've put on screen time on her phone and limited her social networking hours in a certain period of the day so she can finish her book.
Because the thing that was scaring me the most is
The fear of not finishing the book.
Fear of finishing the book and it being a disaster. Because it's a really good book right now because it isn't finished.
Yeah.
Because you're not social networking anymore.
So the everyday action was to put the FaceTime, was to limit the FaceTime. And this came about as a result of turning the assumption on its head.
Yes.
So what was the assumption?
The assumption was that I would fail. And then she asked me what the, and time.
Time.
And then she asked me the opposite of the assumption was I said, well, I would succeed and that I have plenty of time.
And she said the discipline of finishing the project. And I said, so what's stopping you? And she said, social media.
Okay.
And I said, well, I can fix that.
She grabbed my phone.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Would anyone else like to share an insight or a revelation? Yeah. So your assumption was that it was a really big mountain to climb? And okay, and turning it on its head, you understood that actually you could take baby steps. Great. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. So now that you know a little bit more about your failure story, and now that you have this tool at your fingertips, you can take this home and use it whenever you like. I want you to consider some questions because we're going to think about the everyday actions now. So I'm going to put some questions up on the screen in a moment, as if like magic they will appear at some point. And what I'd love you to do is I'd like you to talk to the person sitting next to you and also engage some of the other people around you. So have a little brainstorm and consider. We talked earlier about your support network, your safety net, your personal board. So consider, who is it you need in your environment? Who are the kind of people you want on your personal board? What do you need in your environment? What are the things that you need every day to kind of get you through so that you can bounce back? What do you need to say to yourself when you're having that chat, as Lisa described, in the mirror? What do you need to say? What's the pep talk you need to give? What's the Mr. Newsome round the racetrack? What is he saying to you to get you through? And what do you need to let go of? What do you need to give yourself permission to do? So have a little brainstorm, and we're going to see if we can come up with some everyday actions. And I'm just going to let you know when we're done. I'm going to give you about 5 or 6 minutes to do that. Go.
A stranger's light comes on slowly. A stranger's heart without a home. You put your hands into your head and then smile, cover your heart. Fade into you. to turn away, leave it all behind. So much surround
Okay. Okay. I'd love to know some of the ideas that you've come up with. So, would anyone like to share their best tips on what you need in your environment? Yeah.
I personally need nature around me.
Nature.
Trees, grass, flowers.
How does that help you bounce back?
Bounce back because it relaxes me and I can see nature and it's warm and it's beautiful without needing anything.
So you know that you need nature in order to relax you and help you to feel more resilient. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? What do you need in your environment? Yeah.
I think positive people around you,
Mm-hmm.
just people that you can share your failures with and they will just back you up regardless and just push you to move forward.
So it's the people who will back you up regardless. That's what you need in order to bounce back, is those people who've really got your back. Okay, thank you. Yeah, at the back.
People who will also challenge your opinions and the place you fall back to kind of, feel so people who will also go and you kind of have to be accountable to them because they know you as well as they know your opinions.
So people who will challenge you, people who have got slightly different opinions from you. So as well as the people who will back you up, as people who've got different insights and who will challenge you. Yeah, that's really, really useful to know, isn't it? That that's what you need. Anyone else? Who else do you need in your environment? Bloom. What's that? Bloom. Yeah, Bloom. A network, a supportive network. Someone had their hand up over here. Yep.
Yeah, in general, like a diverse group of people, right? Kind of helping it, bringing it down to statistics. Like if something is happening, I've got a diverse group of people around. They can help put things into perspective, right? Like bringing it back to the fact that everyone has different ways. There's different ways of going about life.
Yeah.
That definitely helps because it's like, sometimes we get caught out into our own view. That's built up of our own experience.
Absolutely. So it's people who will bring a different perspective to help you see all of the different opportunities there are for you. Thank you. What do you need to say to yourself? Who had a good thing to say to themselves? Yeah. What's the worst? And then you know, because if the answer is possibly, unless you are an extreme mountain climber who does it without any strings, then you might think again and do something different. But yeah, taking it to the nth degree, what's the worst that could happen? What else do you need to say to yourself? Yes. Yeah. What can I learn? Lovely. So it's almost predicting that the failure, that the outcome could be failure and there might be a learning opportunity. Great, thank you. Yes?
What would you say if it was a friend in your position? I feel like you often judge yourself more harshly than you would other people. And you kind of like give it a different perspective. If it's like a friend and you're almost more supportive of the idea or what you should do, so kind of flipping on its head is quite helpful.
So being as kind to yourself as you might be to one of your friends. Lovely. Thank you. And what do you need to let go of? Yes? Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Who notices that as part of their failure story, stops them? Yeah. Yeah, the desire to always look good. Yeah? Who relates to that? Yeah. Worrying what people think of you, and that leads to fear of failure and then inaction. Anyone else want to let go of something? Yeah, I'm going right to the back there. Inbox zero. What's that? Tick, tick, tick. I'll get to the big stuff when I've tick, tick, ticked. Yeah, lovely. Inbox zero. I've never heard that before. Yes, at the back. Perfectionism. God, who's guilty of perfectionism? I would say guilty. Who is a perfectionist? Yeah, so good enough. Great. One more for what we want to let go of. Yes. I see. Yeah, so it's almost the flip side. So so actually just get on with it. There's no time like the present. Lovely. So we've all come up with some really lovely ideas, some everyday actions and thoughts to help us to bounce back and fail better. And what we'd love is, because there's so much collective wisdom in the room, we'd love to share with everyone. And also, I think probably the idea is to share this outside this room with we'd love to share your favorite tips. So on your chair, I think you will find a cue card. And we would love you to fill in the best insight, your favorite insight, a piece of advice you would love to share to help yourself and others fail better. What's the best thing that you've heard today? So just take a second to fill that in. Done. What's that? Yeah. Okay. So we've put a box here in the corner of the stage, and we would love it if on your way out you could just slip your piece of advice into that box on the corner of the stage. That is all we've got time for today. You'll be delighted to know that it is drinks time. And on the back of the tool that I've given you are a few questions for you to take home if you would like, for you to continue to think about this topic of failure. So I wish you all happy failing, and thank you so much for working with me this evening. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rosie. That was brilliant. Was slightly nervous this new format wasn't going to work, but I think after that and kind of seeing how engaged everyone has been, not an epic fail, so I'm very pleased there. But I just want to say thank you to our panel. So thank you, Nikki, Lisa, Spark, and Andrew. Nikki. Thank you. And thank you to Rosie. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you to women at Facebook. Is anyone a woman at Facebook here? Thank you very much. And thank you to the Bloom team. So there's quite a few. The Bloom team have all grouped together to create this and volunteer. So Victoria Brooks, the Strat team, Victoria, the strategy team, which is Rosie and Zara Bryson, the events team led by Chloe and Emily. Yeah, it's a beast of an event to pull off, and they've done it well. The marketing team, led by Emma, Sally, our COO, sorting out the booth of truth, and our fundraising team. And then, yeah. But thank you, all of you guys, for getting really involved. It really does make a difference. But I've got 2 announcements before we go to the bar. Stay tuned for our next event. So the team have been working hard on Bloomfest. We've got a date, Wednesday the 16th of October. We've got a venue. Thank you, Emily, Channel 4. So tickets will be on sale very shortly. And then all those that bought raffle tickets. So we've raised just under £1,000 for Women's Aid, which is absolutely brilliant. What we are missing is 26 quid. So if anyone has, if we could just do a whip round, if we can get 26 quid, then we've got £1,000. But Katie's going to come up here and just announce some of the winners.
Right, so to make things move faster, we've already pre-drawn. Steph, don't go anywhere, you're drawing. So we've already, first of all, I need to thank our kind sponsors who've donated prizes this evening. The Telegraph, Made.com, Lurita, Lion, ITV, Good Stuff, Virgin, and Siobhan Squire. So we've had some great prizes this evening, and as Steph said, raised almost £1,000. So, first up, I'm going to run through the names of people. We've pre-drawn a few just because we're running behind schedule. So, if we call your name now, whoop by all means. But don't come up to the stage. Come see us outside afterwards.
Think we've got time for whooping.
So, Sally H. Congratulations. Fiona Cameron, Ilona S. Andrew Gibson, I think he's a Bloom members contact. He may not be here tonight, but pick up his prize. Shiv and Clem as well. So we have 4 star prizes left to draw. Steph is going to do the honours. First up, we're going to do 90-minute executive coaching session with a team at Equal Talent. It's RRP 600 quid plus VAT, so it's a big old prize.
And the winner is Rihanna Atkins.
Woo! Congratulations, Rihanna. Woo! Okay, next up, the team at Taboola have really kindly donated champagne tea at the Ritz. I really hope I win this.
The winner is Katie Bradshaw.
Woo! We have, courtesy of the brilliant team at LinkedIn, we have dinner at the River Cafe. Dinner for 2 at the River Cafe.
Oh, we've got Flora at Beeswax.
Woo! She's going to be chuffed with that. Final prize. Thanks to Virgin Experience Days, we have dinner for 2 at Marco Pierre White. I think that comes with cocktails.
It does come with cocktails, and it's for Nick Leonard via Sophia Durrani.
Brilliant. Congratulations to all the winners. Come and see us outside to pick up your prizes.
Yes. And then very quickly before the bar, there's some feedback forms that will be going out after the event.
Good point. We have a final prize.
And we have a prize as an incentive, so please do fill it in. It will be very quick, and we do take all of the learnings for that to help us shape Bloomfest.
It's not a booze-related prize as well, so even if you don't drink, you've got no excuse, you should definitely fill it in. It's John Lewis vouchers. Who doesn't love John Lewis? You can even spend them in Waitrose.
Thank you, and please go to the bar.